Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sara Banta. I'm a busy wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional, but that's not all. I'm also the founder of the multi-award-winning Accelerated Health Products, a brand offering natural scalar enhanced supplements to optimize your health. And this podcast is not just a source of information or a community. We're all here to learn and grow on our health journeys, regardless of where you are today. And the podcast is the springboard to learning. The free group coaching on Telegram is where we continue learning together. You can ask your questions. I post tips and tools to deepen your health and keep you motivated in moving forward. So here's what you can expect. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday with in-depth health discussions and expert guests like today. Hot topic issues that are in the news every Friday to keep things fun. And then, of course, followed with the free group coaching on Telegram. You can find the details on my website at sarabanthealth.com. And have you thought about detoxing, but you're a little worried if it's too much for you or worried about those detox flu symptoms? Well, I've created over 10 unique easy detox cleanse programs to help reset your body, including your hormones, while feeling great, and there are no detox symptoms. Just take the detox quiz on sarabanthealth.com to find out which one's right for you, and maybe you're not ready for a detox. Maybe you just want to start with 1 or 2 supplements. You can fill out the free supplement protocol on the website, and I will personally put together a protocol for you. Just by taking a few steps forward with your health, you will change your life. And the difference is I'm here every step of the way. Today, I'm so excited. We've got one of my very favorite guests back, Dr. Felice Gersh. She is the hormone expert. So all of you women in that perimenopause, menopausal age, and you know what? We're going to be talking about the younger generation next time we have her on. But for today, we're talking about us and what do we do with these hormones? There's so much going on, and Dr. Felice Gersh is the expert. She is a medical doctor, but she has that holistic, great understanding of what's really going on in the body as well, and that is so rare. Welcome. How are you today?
Well, I'm great, and it's wonderful to join you and talk about the topic that we selected.
Yes, HRT. Does it get to the root of your menopausal symptoms, or should you just jump right in and not look at anything else, or should you have all of these things together? It's complicated, and we've talked before how our hormones are complicated. Us women are very special and complicated. Our men are very simple. And I just want to start with the fact that I had my own issues this last fall where my liver got hijacked by viral activity. I wasn't even able to process fat. It was not working as far as processing my proteins. And if I had thrown in any hormone, I'm not just talking about estrogen and progesterone, testosterone. I'm talking about whether I was throwing in a thyroid hormone or adrenal glandular or anything. My liver was so backed up, it couldn't process anything. So it shows me that if I had thrown any hormone at me, my body wouldn't have been able to do anything with it because I had to first address my liver health. But that's not to say that there's a place for HRT. So this is where I want to get into. We're in this new world with toxins through the roof. You know, Dr. Gersh, you and I are in Southern California. We just had those fires. We're safe, but we are being exposed to the toxins in the air, right? We've got winds again. We've got the microplastics. We've got the bad estrogens. And I love how you talked about, or we talked about the fact that it's not estrogen dominance, it's estrone dominance. There's many different estrogens. They're not all the same. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it is so complicated, and a lot of these new modern threats are really wreaking havoc on the body, and women are just exhausted trying to find answers. So with all that said, let's start with the importance of tackling the low-hanging fruit first when it comes to managing this perimenopause and menopausal time of life for us women.
Well, I think the word complicated that you mentioned a few times really says it all in a nutshell, is that it is complicated. And hormones, I say always, essential, foundational, necessary, but not sufficient. If we look at young women, say in their 20s and 30s, who have fully functional ovaries, at least reasonably so. They're not old ovaries. They don't have old eggs like what happens to the perimenopausal women, and then of course no eggs left when you get into the full-blown postmenopausal years. But these young women often have a wide array of metabolic dysfunctions. Mm-hmm. So even women who have, and we know that obesity rates in young women, metabolic dysfunctions, infertility, all these things are skyrocketing. And it's not because they have old ovaries. It's because of all these other outside influences that are impacting how their hormones are being produced and then how they're working in the body. So understanding the essential nature of hormones, but their lack of being, omniscient or, all serving, all powerful. They're just part of the piece of the puzzle. So I always like to say, if optimal health is like a jigsaw puzzle and you have 1,000 pieces, the 600 center pieces, involve all of our natural hormones, the way the body works inherently, enzymes and peptides and all those things. But the surrounding 400, which is critical, because we always know when you want to put a jigsaw puzzle together, you start with the frame, you start with the straight edges, right? And then you build from the outside in. Well, the outside in, those other 400 pieces are all the lifestyle components. Mm-hmm. What you eat, how you live, how you move, how you sleep, and then targeted supplementation. So you're never going to put the puzzle together if all you have are the center pieces. You have to have those other outside. So to have the total state of health, to have all your pieces of your jigsaw puzzle put together, you need to incorporate more than just hormones. But hormones are essential because otherwise you're going to be having a giant gap in the center of your puzzle. So when you look at it that way, then you see everything as interconnected. So then you go through the whole litany of what can you do to help your hormones that you do have either being made naturally during the perimenopause still to optimize your health, and how can you create more long-lived ovaries, because we know there are some ways that you can get some extra mileage out of those ovaries. And then when there's no more ovarian function left and you're using exogenous outside hormones, you're getting hormone therapy, what can you do to optimize your body's use of those hormones? Metabolism, like you mentioned, because everything ultimately gets eliminated from the body. Like you do not have the same hormones in your body when you're 30 that you had when you were 17. It doesn't work that way. You got to get rid of the old and in with the new. So you got to have good ways of doing the transformation, like you mentioned, in your liver through the gut, to transform these hormones into metabolic products that the body can then eliminate properly. So yes, it's complex. Hormones are essential, foundational, but not all encompassing, that all you need is hormones. That's why I really despise, I hate to use that word, but I do. I despise hormone clinics, that all they do is throw out hormones to people and they don't look at the total body's situation. They're not actually looking at anything beyond, well, you're of the age that you need some hormones and here's your hormones. Have a nice day. That's not good health care. So, that's why, it's just so important to understand hormones and the role they play, but they're not the be all end all. They're just part of the way to achieve optimal health.
So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it that we are losing our hormones and then it's causing adrenal issues and thyroid issues and mood issues? Or are we insulin resistant, our thyroid's going down just as we age, and our adrenals are going down, and then our hormones suffer? Because the thyroid's the master endocrine gland. It affects the gonads. It affects the adrenals. So that's where I wonder, like, if you address the thyroid, the adrenals, the liver, then maybe you need less of the hormonal therapy versus you do the hormonal therapy first and then address the other issues.
Well, there is actually no playbook on this. There is no program. There's actually limited data. But the way that I look at it, I see the interconnection. So I see it in most cases, but I'll give you the exception in a second, as sort of a package deal. Like if you look at, we'll go like some of these different endocrine systems that are all, of course, interconnected. The thyroid gland, for example, has receptors to estrogen. So without adequate estrogen, the thyroid gland literally will not work properly. So it's like a wild thing that people don't realize, all these interconnections. So, and then if you look at like the adrenal, well, the autonomic nervous system, that's what is controlling all the functions of the body we don't think about, which includes things like your motility of your gut, how your gallbladder contracts, your pancreas putting out digestive enzymes, making saliva, tearing, your temperature, your pulse, how your bladder fills and empties. I mean, you can go through the whole, everything, that is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and the signals, like through what is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the nerve, which is like a big finger of the brain that comes down. It's also known as the 12th cranial nerve, controls the parasympathetic, which is the part of the autonomic nervous system that should be dominant, except if you're injured or if you're being invaded by pathogens like bacteria or viruses. You should be in a state of essentially calm, good digestion. Sometimes they call it rest and digest. You can sleep properly, you digest properly. Well, it turns out that the vagus nerves, the neurotransmitter, because it's part of the neurological system, is acetylcholine, which is actually modulated in its production and function by estrogen. And the other part of the autonomic nervous system, which is called sympathetic, but sympathetic doesn't mean like I'm empathetic. No, it's sympathetic S like stress. Okay. And part of the stress response is adrenergic as in adrenal. And when you have a stress response, you put out different types of neurotransmitters, epinephrine, norepinephrine, that makes your heart beat faster and you get like sort of sweaty. That's from those neurotransmitters. But you then have more of the adrenergic, so it triggers the adrenal gland to make more cortisol. And then you have too much cortisol coming out, and too much cortisol if you have chronic stress, because the stress response is supposed to be acute, like when you need it, like you were just lacerated, you were injured, you were attacked by pathogens and so on. But if you're chronically stressed, as is so common in our society these days, you put out initially too much cortisol. Too much cortisol will change your state of inflammation. You'll get leaky gut. So then you'll have leaky gut. You're going to have dysbiosis. You'll have inflammation. You'll have the endotoxins coming from the gut into the body, and systemic inflammation, which increases insulin resistance. So then you become like pre-diabetic. And then when you make too much cortisol, along for the ride comes too much DHEAS, which is the androgen. That's why women, when they're stressed, they get pimples because they get too much of this androgen. So you can see how it's all connected. And then when you have all that problem with your too much cortisol, It messes with your circadian rhythm. And then you have appetite dysregulation. You can't sleep properly. And then you get more metabolic dysfunction. And then you have more inflammation. And if you have functioning ovaries, you have more inflammation in your ovaries, which downregulates the production of progesterone. And then you get irregular cycles and infertility and problems. So, so you can see it really is like a circle. You can enter this circle with stress, with estrogen deficiency, and, with thyroid problems. So it's complex. I keep coming back to that word. So in younger women, I try to address everything at the same time to people's tolerance. Like if they're younger, I don't give them hormones right out the gate. Typically, I would work with like exactly what you said. I would work to try to help their ovaries to work better by if they actually are in a state of thyroid deficiency, like they have Hashimoto's and they have low thyroid, I would give them thyroid supplementation. But if that's not the case and they're just sort of like maybe not converting optimally T4 to T3, which can be a sign of chronic stress. It can also be a sign of deficiencies of micronutrients like selenium. So, it's like I like to do micronutrient testing and then support as much as I can targeted, like what people are deficient in. Like, for example, to make thyroid hormone, you need a whole array of micronutrients. You cannot make thyroid properly if you don't have enough iodine and iron and zinc and selenium and copper. And I mean, you have to have these micronutrients. And then if you don't have enough estradiol, then the thyroid gland just doesn't work as well. If you have too much cortisol, then you're not going to have proper conversion because you'll make too much reverse T3. So it's, oh my gosh, it can seem overwhelming, but the way that you approach it is if you're a younger woman who still has ovarian function, and that can include perimenopausal women, you can work to then try to optimize their ovarian function through getting them on a very anti-inflammatory diet, giving some antioxidants. We know that certain supplements can help the ovaries to work longer, like urolithin A, like DHEA, interestingly, magnesium, melatonin. There are tremendous amounts of receptors for melatonin on the ovaries. The ovaries need to be in a body that has proper circadian rhythm. That's why sleep is so important, and having bright light in the day and darkness at night is so important. So you get the right rhythms and production of melatonin, but adding some supplemental melatonin has also been shown to help extend the lifespan of ovaries. So in younger women, who obviously have some hormones and hopefully have the capability of having ovarian function longer, I would work with all the ancillary things first, work on gut health and stress and sleep and avoidance of like the ubiquitous toxicants and endocrine disruptors, the xenoestrogens and so on, work to improve their body's detoxification pathways so that they can hopefully eliminate some of these toxicants. And in women who are postmenopausal, but not too old, like we'll say that they're within 10 years of menopause, I'll start them on some hormones at the same time as I'm doing all of this. In much older women, like say they're already well into their 60s or 70s, I'm not going to start them right out the gate on the hormones because there is a chance that they'll use the estradiol to push down certain enzymatic pathways that can lead to the wrong production of end products. And so I want to first work to reduce systemic. Of course, I do a lot of monitoring and measuring. I get a lot of labs. I check vascular health, heart health. So I get ultrasounds of these different structures and so on. And then I will try to do what I can with working with natural approaches to improve gut health, lower inflammation, improve the state of nitric oxide production through supplementation and such. And then I'll slowly, starting low, add in the hormones, but not until I have shown through testing that inflammation is coming down, the gut is improving. And to that end, I do use a lot of phytoestrogen foods. I call them nature's gift to women because they have these molecules in them called phytoestrogens, and there's a whole array of them throughout the plant world. So it's not just vegetables, it's nuts and seeds and grains, all these things, all the legumes. They have different varieties of phytoestrogens, which can bind weakly to our own estrogen receptors and in a very safe and beneficial way to create a way of restoring mitochondrial health, gut health, liver health. So I never leave out the vital phytonutrients, which includes these phytoestrogens, because they can be miraculous. And then in terms of gut health, I always want to include probiotic foods along with some probiotic supplementation and lots of fiber foods. These are wonderful to help feed and nourish our gut microbes. So it's definitely individualized based on my testing. But in younger women, I would not jump into hormones, but I definitely would in the women who are in the early stages, along with all the lifestyle. But in the later stages of menopause, I would not jump right into hormones.
So I'm so glad you said all of this, because just this weekend I had a house full of 18-year-old girls and the conversation of birth control came up. Now, it was not for birth control. It's for their hormones. It's for their heavy periods and the painful menstruation and all of the symptoms. It wasn't about, boyfriends and all of that stuff. Anyways, I said, well, did your doctor, I'm happy to look at your blood tests for you. And they said, well, I didn't get a blood test. I said, your doctor put you on a prescription and did not take a single blood test? No. She just said, I know what you're going through. This is the one I'm going to put you on. I put my daughter on it. And I was ready to blow my mind because as you said, we are so complicated. And with hormones, you have just a little too much estrogen or a little too much testosterone or progesterone. It throws everything out of balance. And if you don't know what your, how do I say it? Taking care of the sleep and the stress and the liver health and all of these other things to get your baseline. So where where maybe you do need the right level of hormones. You might be over giving a hormone. You might be under giving. You might not be doing the right amount. And when I got my blood test and my liver enzymes were through the roof, guess what else looked horrible? My cortisol was way up. My reverse T3 was way up. My testosterone was way down. My testosterone's always been good. So my point is that just because my body was over here fighting viral activity and my liver was suffering, it had this cascade of issues and effects on all of my other hormones. My blood sugar was through the roof. And I hadn't changed anything. When what's so crazy is now my blood sugar, it's totally fine. I haven't changed what I'm eating. I was eating the same things back then, but that's how all of these other factors could be playing around with your hormones. And I heard you say something about it's not just the hormones you're getting or you're taking in, but it's your receptor sites able to actually use them or being resistant to them and losing the, just like you become insulin resistant, can you become resistant to some of these female hormones?
Well, you can have malfunction of any receptor. That is absolutely true. And we know that if you are on, and this is why I speak against this all the time, if you are put on as a menopausal woman, static low dose hormones, okay? So and what does that mean? You get a small dose of estradiol, usually most commonly as one of the very lower dose patches. That's the most common form. It can be the gel that's also available. These are commercial products. That's what's typically used because most conventional doctors would not touch compounded products. So we'll talk about the most commonly used in the medical world. And then we definitely want to talk about, I want to talk about you, what you described about you, going back to that in a minute. But if we talk about the way that hormone receptors work, that is really a critically important point, because the most common use of hormones these days is a little bit of estradiol, usually with a low dose patch, and at night, an oral dose of progesterone. The most common is 100 milligrams. Sometimes people are using 200, but those are the two commercial doses, 100 and 200. So those are the ones that are typically used. And this is, we're talking about, typical conventional medical world, and also a lot of the online companies that are prescribing, like by the truckload, and that's their typical regimen. So that's not the way nature ever gives hormones to a woman. There's no time in a woman's lifespan that she would naturally have hormones like that ever, where her ovaries would be making a little bit of estrogen and some progesterone every day, the same dose over and over and over. So in a real healthy, young, reproductive aged woman, and just as a throwing out, this is so important because this goes back, and we'll definitely talk about it another day, the young women who are having messed up periods, like irregular and painful and heavy, the menstrual cycle is a vital sign. That's official. A vital sign, like what's a vital sign? Your blood pressure, your pulse, your temperature. It's like, so if your menstrual cycle is messed up in any way, that is a sign. Like if you were walking around and you had tachycardia, your pulse was always 120, like that would be a problem. Not only would a cardiologist give you a beta blocker to lower your pulse, but they would also do some testing, like what's going on with your heart. They wouldn't just walk away. They wouldn't, like the doctors, like you talked about, who do no testing of these young girls, and they just throw them on birth control pills. So it's important to recognize that the menstrual cycle is a vital sign. So if we look at a normal menstrual cycle, the levels of estradiol, that's estradiol, the estrogen made by the ovaries, and progesterone, not progestin, what's in a birth control pill, but that's a made up word, but a real, real progesterone that the ovaries make, they are not static. The same amount comes out of the ovaries a little bit every day. It's dynamic. They're variable. You start when you have your period, that the first day of your period is called day 1 of a new cycle. At that point, the estradiol level and the progesterone are very low, very low. And then the progesterone stays extremely low. The estradiol level starts to rise until you're around day 12 in a 28-day cycle, when you have a big spike of estradiol, and that triggers a spike of LH, luteinizing hormone, which then triggers ovulation. And then the ovary starts making more and more progesterone, which goes up into a high amount, and then it plateaus for a while. And then if you're not pregnant, it comes down again, and then you start all over again. The estradiol level, after that giant spike that triggers the LH spike, which triggers ovulation, it dips, and then it comes back up to a level higher than what was produced in the first half of the menstrual cycle. So you actually make more estradiol in the second half of the menstrual cycle than in the first half, and you make a lot of progesterone that you don't make at all in the first half of the menstrual cycle. So what is the relationship of these hormones to the receptors? Well, it's very involved and intricate. Estradiol upregulates, so it makes more functional its own receptors, the receptors of progesterone, testosterone, and thyroid. So as your estradiol levels increase, the functionality, the effectiveness of the receptors of testosterone, thyroid, estrogen itself, and progesterone increase. So then when you're mid-cycle, your testosterone, and you have that giant estrogen spike, your testosterone is also at its peak, but it has a very small rhythm in women, but it's actually a little higher. But the testosterone receptors are working optimally at that point, as is your thyroid receptor, for optimization of sex drive, libido, sexual receptiveness of the female to the male, and thyroid function, and progesterone. the receptors for progesterone are working really high at that point, and then you start making all that progesterone, and your estradiol level in the second half is quite high. Now, when the progesterone drops and the estrogen drops, which is the start of the new cycle, that is like a reboot to the receptors. It's like a clean slate, and then they start fresh. When you have progesterone, when progesterone is high in the second half of the menstrual cycle, progesterone downregulates the receptor function of estradiol and of testosterone. So testosterone becomes less effective on its own receptors in the second half of the menstrual cycle, as does estrogen, which is somewhat compensated by the increase in production of estrogen. And the reason the receptors are downregulated by progesterone is because part of the essential nature of becoming pregnant is that the growth of the uterine lining has to stop. Okay, so the first half of the menstrual cycle is called, from the uterine perspective, proliferative. The uterine lining is growing or proliferating. And then the second half, when progesterone comes out, is called secretory. It's like flourishing. It's like flowering, but it doesn't grow taller. It just like fills out. It's like a teenage boy who grows like a weed, but he's skinny, and then he stops growing, and then, whoa, where are these muscles coming from, right? So that's like the uterine lining. It just fills out and just becomes blossoming, but it can't keep growing. It can't keep growing. So progesterone downregulates the estrogen receptors. Well, what happens with this continuous static dosing in menopausal women? It's totally irrational. You're not having proper function of your receptors. So continuous progesterone is continuously downregulating the receptors for testosterone and downregulating the receptors for estradiol. And the estradiol levels are so low that it's not going to have the adequate impact on testosterone receptors or on the thyroid receptors. So nothing is going to be working optimally. And over time, when you have this continuous static dosing, the receptors become less and less receptive, kind of what they call tachyphylaxis, where if like you hear a noise in the background, after a while, you just tune it out. Okay. So that's why some women, after they've been on these static dosing for a while, they suddenly start having a resurgence of night sweats and hot flashes or other menopausal symptoms, because nothing is working right. And you don't have proper physiologic levels or cycles or rhythms. So your receptors are all really not getting optimized in any way. So this is really a terrible problem. And I'm seeing it, just like, prelude to our next conversation, in women who've been on birth control pills for many years, because the hormones in a birth control pill are not human hormones. They're concocted chemicals. Technically, if you go to the government site on the National Institutes of Health, NIH site, toxicology.gov, you'll see all the ingredients in birth control pills officially listed as endocrine disruptors. Because remember, the fundamental goal of a birth control pill is to block normal function of the ovaries. So they're really actually endocrine disruptors, just like plastic is an endocrine disruptor. I know that sounds weird to say, but I call a spade a spade. Okay, so they are endocrine disruptors, and they affect the receptors of hormones differently. And I'm finding, and this has not really been published, but I'm seeing it, and that's how most of everything that humanity has acquired as far as new skills and learning is through this amazing thing called observation. Okay. Not a placebo-controlled double-blinded study by a big pharma company, but actual observation. Like, remember Newton? You're like, oh, the apple fell from the tree, gravity, So the bottom line is observation, matters. I have seen so many young women who were put on birth control pills when they were like 14. You can put on women on birth control pills, if you call them women, they're kids, after they've been 1 year out. This is official in the literature. If you've had 12 months since your first period, you can go on birth control pills. So you could be 12. Okay, reality. Okay. So I've seen these young women put on birth control pills at a very early age, and then they decide they want to get pregnant, and now they're like 33. Okay. Oh my goodness. They've been on birth control pills for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Their whole reproductive life. What do you think that does to their receptors? Well, nobody actually knows or seems to care. But what I have seen is that not all of them, some of them like click back, it's very individual, but some of them never click back right. They go off the birth control pills and they all explode with polycystic ovary syndrome that they never had. Okay.
Yeah.
I think being chronically on birth control pills affects the estrogen and progesterone receptors, that they become malfunctional because of not being properly used or having like the wrong thing stuck in them. And then they become malfunctional. And so you actually are creating PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so they all get acne and they're having irregular cycles and infertility. And they're all being told, oh, you have PCOS. Yeah, that's true, but it's drug induced. Okay. So nature didn't do this. The drugs did. And this is not insignificant. It's part of our explosion of PCOS. That's not all. I mean, it's like a whole big deal, but that's part of it, is that chronic long-term use of birth control pills impacts the way these hormone receptors work. When you get rid of those birth control pill hormones and they're exposed to natural hormones, they don't work right. So this is not a little deal. So, and this matters in menopause in every age. Receptors are how hormones work, so it's really critical that we rethink all of our I've long ago I didn't even think of it in the first place. I think nature knows best. I always say the biggest experiment in we're smarter than nature that failed horribly is ultra processed food.
Yes.
Oh, we can create food that's better than nature's food? I don't think so. And I think we can create hormone regimens that never exist in nature, with rhythms that are non-existent, with doses that are completely incompatible with anything in a woman's life. And we're going to outsmart nature? I do not think so. So I think most of the hormone therapy that's now being prescribed is crazy. I don't know. I'm trying to be soft here, not too politically incorrect here, but no, it's not. It doesn't make any sense. It's like if you think ultra processed food is good, then you think those hormone regimens are good. If you don't think ultra processed food is good, why would you do a comparable with your hormone regimens? So that is, crazy thinking to think that we can create hormone regimens. Or how about hormones that are also not nature's hormones, that we're going to make better hormones than nature makes? I don't think so. So, I'm a very simple thinker. I always say that we want to have natural everything as much as we can. And in medicine, when women, because I deal predominantly with women, when they have medical problems, and that's why I call myself integrative. I do not abandon conventional approaches.
Right.
I did surgery. I did many, many, many thousands of hysterectomies, dealing with ovarian tumors and ginormous fibroids. I mean, I can't treat everything with an herb. I mean, realistically, so there's a level of care that you have to have that matches the level of problem, so sometimes you do need surgery. Okay. I did C-sections when I had to, but I had a relatively low C-section rate compared to what's happening today. But sometimes you do it. You save the woman's life and the baby's life. So I'm not against, and sometimes, there are drugs that are really essential in certain situations, but you don't want to start with like the big guns when you could do something that's simpler and safer and more natural. So that's why I have what I call my green medicine, which is herbal medicine, but I still, when I need to, I use pharmaceutical medicine. Somebody shows up in my office with a blood pressure 180 over 120. I'm not going to treat it just with an herb. Okay, because they might have a stroke tomorrow. So, but the reality is that when we can, we want to de-escalate in terms of using over-the-top pharmaceuticals or procedures and try to start with a more natural approach when we can. And everything is tailored to the individual situation. And if you really want to have healthy longevity, you have to have all those pieces of your puzzle put together, which includes all the lifestyle pieces, but you need hormones that are compatible with being healthy, which means hormones compatible with the way the female body evolved to be, which is not the current regimens that are being used.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you explained this so well, because it also, I loved when you said the noise in the background. It's like, as a mom, when you're screaming at your kids and you're screaming at your kids, eventually your kids are going to stop listening. Right? So your body is going to stop listening when it's just being pounded with something over and over and over again. The one question, because I know we're out of time, I know you need to go, is that if someone is taking hormones like you're explaining, but their receptor sites are not taking them in, and they're like, all of a sudden my hot flashes are back, I'm gaining the weight back again, I don't feel as good, it was working for a little bit and now it's not. On the blood test, am I guessing right that the blood test is going to show that you're in normal range, right? Because you've got X amount of hormones showing up on your blood test, but your body's not listening anymore, so that it's not working like it may work in a normal situation?
Well, usually the estrogen levels, estradiol levels are going to be too low, okay, because they're giving such a low dose. But the dose will be compatible with the level in the blood will be compatible with the dose that's being given. That won't change.
Right.
So the point, yeah, I know. So the point is that you do not have a commercially available test to test how's my receptor working today.
Right.
I know. I wish that we had such a test. So, that those are like research tools. I can't just say, I want to test your receptor. I wish I could do that. So this is information culled from research, not from clinical studies that I could produce in my office, because I don't have that available to me. So, we have to trust what science has already shown us. So if that's the case, and you're in that group and you want to switch to a more physiologic, rational, I call it like biologically compatible hormone regimen, then you just have to just make the switch. And, over time, your body will adjust to new rhythms. So that's actually easier to address than the women who've been 20 years on birth control pills. And I'll tell you, women who've been on birth control pills, like they had their kids in their 20s, and then they're put on birth control pills for the next 30 years until
Right.
and then they take them off at 55, and then you want to put them on hormone therapy. They are the most challenging group because their receptors are so dysfunctional from being 30 years on birth control pills or so. Those women, you have to be very patient. And like I said, there's no real groundwork set to how to treat these people. So it's highly individualized, and there's little research on any of these things. So we're always kind of biohacking on our own because there literally is no playbook for this stuff. We're just trying to do our best, but we know that understanding the problem is the first step, but that doesn't automatically give us the resolution of the problem. We have to, but at least we know what we're up against, but this is not easy stuff. That's why I beg people not to spend most of their reproductive life on chemical endocrine disruptors. Can we try to avoid that? We get enough from our environmental exposures, let alone from popping a pill or something, that you're doing intentionally, but without informed consent. So they don't really know what they're doing. I can tell you these young girls who are getting put on birth control pills. And by the way, I am a feminist I use that word embracingly. I was a feminist back in the 1970s. I'm totally for women's rights. Okay. And I don't want women to have babies when they're not ready and don't want them. But that doesn't mean that the solution, we should put chemical endocrine disruptors into everybody's bodies. 90% of young women are getting endocrine disruptors. I'm just saying, can we please do better? Right. I mean, can we have birth control that doesn't involve toxic and we'll call them slow poisons? They don't just kill you right away, but there's actually published data that young women who start on birth control pills in their teens have a higher lifetime risk of cardiovascular events like heart attacks and strokes. Like they have higher risk of breast cancer. they have higher risk of cervical cancer. Why is this being ignored? But I don't want women to get pregnant when they're not ready. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to go to Victorian England either. I just want better solutions, but we'll never get them if we're not honest about the current methods that are being used. That's all I want to say, about it, because I just want to make it clear that I am not for uncontrolled reproductive function here. I just want better solutions, and it's not going to happen if we just like embrace as a society birth control hormones, these endocrine disruptors, and not admit that we are doing something that is not actually in the best interest from a health point of view. So, but
Yeah, and
it's complicated.
It is complicated. I've got 2 daughters, so selfishly, I want to make sure that there's other options. And I'm super excited to dive deeper into that topic next time. But this was so helpful because, and I've got 18-year-olds that I'm going to send to your office, and I've got menopausal women I'm going to be sending to you as well. I'm super lucky that you're in my backyard. But Dr. Gersh, your books are amazing, and they're a great tool for people to go to really understand, because we're just scraping the tip of the iceberg here, and all of your knowledge is, we could talk for hours and hours. So please tell people where they can find you and your amazing books.
Well, my books are on Amazon. And so I have 2 on PCOS and 1 on menopause, which I am very proud to say my menopause book, Menopause 50 Things You Need to Know. When it came out, it was rated as the #1 best menopause book by Good Housekeeping magazine. And I still think it should be top of the pile, but I don't know what the current rating is, but that's how it was when it first came out just a couple of years ago. And it's available on Amazon as well. I'm a working dude, so I'm in my office in a converted exam room, doing this podcast. So I see patients 5 days a week, unless I'm traveling, which is part of the time, but most of the time I'm in my office seeing patients. I'm a very archaic doctor. I have a brick and mortar practice. I do exams, I do procedures in my office, and I see patients of all ages, as long, I don't see too many under the age of 12, but under certain special circumstances at any age, and all the way up to however high you can get. Okay. So I see women for all the different stages of life, and try to take, like you mentioned, an integrative, holistic approach using the tools, which I call my expanded therapeutic toolbox, because I've done the fellowship and I'm board certified in integrative medicine as well as OBGYN. And so the name of my practice is Integrative Medical Group of Irvine. Irvine, California is my home.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much once again. Your knowledge is way beyond anyone else in this area. So appreciative, and I can't wait to share this with everybody. So thanks again for joining us. Oh my goodness, what just an hour of knowledge. Dr. Felice Gersh, she is amazing. I wanted to just touch on a couple things. Number 1, lifestyle. It's that processed food. We got to eat the whole foods, and we want to focus on that wild animal protein, get rid of the oxalates and the sulfur that could be disrupting our detox pathways. Our liver is so important to this hormonal health. Why not take care of your liver and see maybe you don't need as many hormones, or don't need them at all, or that your symptoms are going away. If you're not sleeping, could be your liver. That dirty liver, the liver is the main detoxification organ. It is responsible for producing estrogen binding protein, which helps clean up the bad estrogens, not the good ones. And when the liver is dirty, it has a difficult time doing this. It's where phase 1, 2, and 3 of estrogen detoxification occurs. If these pathways are not open, that estrogen, the bad one, is going to build up in the system, causing hormonal balance and all the issues, whether you're young or old. The other issue to look at is the iodine deficiency. Most of us are deficient in iodine. Well, without enough iodine, estrogen dominance occurs. It is used to clean the blood so the liver can do its job in producing that estrogen binding protein. So that's why I want to focus today on that accelerated liver care. I mentioned my liver was through the roof, and because of it, my testosterone was down, my blood sugar was up, all of my hormones were out of whack. Within 2 weeks, the accelerated liver care brought those numbers down significantly. It is the only liver supplement that has 13 powerful herbs in concentrations much higher than any other liver support supplement. And it detoxes the liver, it rebuilds the liver, it supports your gallbladder health, your fat and protein metabolism, it helps with your blood sugar and cholesterol. It even helps with fighting those viruses and bacteria. It calms the mind. How many of you are feeling crazy because of your hormones? Well, it's also partly due to your liver health. So the accelerated liver care and then the accelerated iodine. You know, I talk about it will help with your liver health. It will help with fighting off the bacteria and the viruses and all the pathogens that could be disrupting things. It neutralizes the toxins, the halogens, all of the bad estrogens that we're talking about, kicks them out of the body, kicks them out of the cells. It is part of that cell membrane health. Remember, the cell membrane is made up of fat and iodine. To get the toxins out and the nutrients in, you need to have a healthy cell membrane, and that involves iodine. And then you need that iodine to increase the ATP in the mitochondria. Dr. Gersh talks about mitochondria health. We're only as healthy as our cells. So that's where the accelerated iodine comes from. Now, then, after you do those 2 supplements, then see where your hormones are, see where your symptoms are, and it might be more manageable. I always love using my Hiwi as well. This device has over 60,000 programs. It has programs for hot flashes, hormonal balances, increasing that testosterone to feel good and get yourself out of bed, cortisol, stress management, sleep programs. I've been playing around with the sleep programs and my Oura Ring is telling me it's working. So those are some things that you can use the Hiwi for as well. Thanks for listening. Our discussion does not have to stop here. If you're feeling lost in the supplement world, I'm here to help. You can start by getting your free supplement protocol. Just go to sarabantahealth.com, complete the form, and I will personally put together a protocol for you. Follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products and join the free group coaching. I'm sure you have questions from Dr. Gersh today. She is so smart and so much knowledge. You actually might need to listen to this a couple times, but you can ask your questions in the group coaching and listen to the podcast anywhere. Just search up Accelerated Health with Sara Banta on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, E360, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and over 100 different podcast platforms. And share this with the women in your life, young or old. Do you have teenagers that are wanting to get on birth control for acne or just those bad periods? Or do you know someone that's been on birth control for 10 years? Or is someone in your life having a really hard time with those menopausal symptoms? They definitely need to listen to this. You can use podcast 10 for 10% off the website as well. And remember, I'm live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So join me next time for more ways to unlock your health potential.